will be the recording session, online video only, session for week number 7 on August 15th. Okay, this is where we stopped for our class on biblical background, study of biblical background, focusing on the Old Testament characters. And like I said before, the reason that we study the characters in the Bible is not just for the character itself, but to try to find the message or messages in that particular episode or story. So each story, it involves certain character or characters. And by these characters interacting with one another and with interacting with God, or sometimes angels, they show us the way of existence as a believer. In the Old Testament, they believed in Yahweh, God, and His plan to send the Messiah to liberate them and to give them a perfect world. So that's their expectation. And because they believe in God, they try to live a godly existence because they are godly characters. So we try to identify how and why and what of these characters to learn from them. That's called the lessons. Lesson or lessons. But above and beyond the lesson is the message. God always has something more than the lesson for us to learn or to receive, rather. He uses various characters, different characters. Either it's going to be the king, it could be the prophets, it could be the just normal, regular people, or judges, or sometimes priest, high priest. And in these study of characters, we do find who we are and how we should live as a believer, and what the intention and the purpose of God for us. So these are things that we are looking for. And in doing so, to understand the Bible and the biblical narratives, told you there are two things that we want to have foundation of. Two main paradigms, biblical paradigms, that runs through the whole Bible, whether it's New Testament or Old Testament. One is paradox. Paradox is contradiction of two, contradicting reality that is existing in reality. In theory, it cannot, but it exists. Or in reality, it cannot, but in theory, it does exist. Either way. So those are paradox, contradicting truths that coexist, sometimes even simultaneously. there are a lot of paradox in the Bible. And then chiasm. Chiasm is as a reversal. It is the beginning and the end. And it has the focal point. And from that point, it begins to reverse and it ends up reversing. So chiasm is a basic pattern or the framework in the biblical narratives. So we'll try to go a little further into the definition of a chiasm. First, an event is mentioned briefly, then its precedents are reviewed in reverse chronologically order as far back as necessary. So time frame could be reversed. That's the kind of chiasm. Again, the narrative reverses itself and moves forward in chronological order until the event in the main narrative line is reached again. So not only in reverse, it flips in content-wise or plot-wise. If we look at the diagram, it starts as A and B, and then B becomes an A and A becomes a B. Sometimes this is evil starts as high, and the good as low. Then as the story develops, there comes a focal point where the reversal occurs, and then good dominates and the evil is going to be defeated. So that's kind of structure. And you find this in most of Western movies, the narratives, not so much today, but usually follows that particular chiasm plot. Biblical chiasm. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled. See? But whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Actually, this would be on there, and that comes to be there. Either way. There's a little wrong. So whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Okay. Putting that dimension to be positive and that dimension to be this dimension to be negative. Same thing with whoever wants to live should give up his or her own life. Who tries to live and hangs to his or her life will be perished. So that's kind of a chiasm, biblical chiasm, that Jesus taught us. Then another framework in the Bible. It basically says, not all the narrative or episodes are the same. Or not all the events in life are significant. There are some days and times that are very significant compared to others. And in the Bible, in Greek word, we call that kairos. Kairos? You may use different wording, That's the thing in Kairos. So either Y or I in Kairos is the time with significance. Even in general history, there's a Kairos moment. French Revolution. It's very Kairos in French history. Independence of United States of America. The independence state. Independent from Great Britain. It's Kairos time in American history. 9/11 would be another Kairos, even though it's a bad one. It's Kairos in the history of the United States of America. Independence of Korea in China from Japanese rule in August 15th of 1945. That's a very significant Kairos day for us Koreans and Chinese. Year 1948. I don't know exact day and time, but the establishment of the nation of Israel in 20th century. That will be quite significant Kairos moment for whole world, and also in redemptive history or history of the Bible. Then again, the day that I was born again, or you were born again, the day that you first ever heard the true and whole gospel. That will be the time, Kairos time for you. Or the marriage, the day of marriage, that will be Kairos for some of you. Or birth of your child, that will be the Kairos time. So these are the so-called meaningful time or significant time. And the biblical stories try to record the Kairos time of these characters, which are relevant and meaningful to not only the characters, to God, and also to us. So it has to satisfy God, the character itself in the story, and for us, the readers today. So it has to be Kairos to all three of us, three beings, and that's how the story is chosen and is written, so you'll have relevance for us today, even thousand years after the actual story had happened and been written. As we read, we feel the same feeling, and then the context and the reality, and then the message as the characters had received and perceived it at the time of the event. So the exclusiveness of time and event, that makes it special, significant, and meaningful. What makes it exclusive? When God says, and when God separates the time slot or that particular episode or the place or event and the character, and it becomes very Kairos. So we are looking into a very special time of these characters. Of course, for us believers, every day, every moment will be important and significant. But yet, there are very, very special moment and then significant time or event that occurs even today for us believers. The reason that we what we are reading is the kairos of that character is because of the exclusive nature of the biblical narratives. The biblical narratives are designed or written so we'll perceive who God is and what God wants in our existence. Again, I repeat this diagram. Your existence and my existence, and or existence of anyone for the matter, is decided by this blank. The reality, basically, fundamentally, will live in the same reality. Even though some of the minor details are different. Some are rich, some are not so rich. Some born into better countries, some are not. Some born into more free countries than others. But still, the fundamental essence or the essence of the reality is the same. The fallen and sinful world that people are trying to avoid and to ignore the existence of God or the authority of God. That's where we are. And the biblical narratives are designed to just select those stories show the reality in its full blown version. Also, as you read the story, you should be able to read between the lines. Between the lines. It takes some training, some experience to be able to read between the lines. But you'll eventually come to know what's behind. What is you'll be able to read what is not written, so to speak. Okay? Dilemma. Dilemma is another element that constructs or characterizes a human reality. The world that we live in is not perfect. It's fallen, like I said just a moment ago. Because it's not perfect, it doesn't satisfy anyone. Even the rich people, you may think if you have all the money in the world, you'll be perfect. But that's never the case. Look at these rich, loaded, super rich people. Whether it's Warren Buffett, the god of the investment, or the owner of the Google, Intel, all these big companies, they make billions loaded. But they still have their issues of their own. Nothing's perfect. And they do face a dilemma. One dilemma that human generation wasn't able to solve is the dilemma of death. You want to live happily forever. But that's only happens in the stories. There is no happily forever. We know that. And we know that. There's a matter of imperfection and human limitation. None of us humans are all powerful or all knowing, just like God is. We are limited. We're limited by time, we are limited by space, and we are limited by death. And conflict of interest. Whether it's a possession or property, or the money or resources, or time, there's always that conflict of interest. Whether you like it or not, choose or not, it does exist. It comes with your reality. So that's kind of dilemma that Bible is trying to show, and they give the answer of a resolution for resolving the dilemma. What dilemma? Also, the issue of priorities, because you have a limited time, and you can be only one place at one time. People invented technology to, overcome that, but there's still, even with the good technology, the modern technology that we have, there's still the limitation that limits our presence and our time. So you have to choose between whatever the wants or needs or tasks that you need to do, and you need to set up priorities. Meaning that you have to throw away something, or just let it be the next priority to something that is more important or urgent. So that's an issue of priority that will make you fall into the situation and reality called dilemma. Conflict and contradictions. If you are a real person, and if you are trying to real life, in fantasies and in your imagination and your dreams, you may not have these conflicts or contradiction or dilemmas. But in reality, because of dilemmas, because there is not enough, or because there is a conflict of interest. Again, that word, conflict, is there. The cause of that is first evil in man. Your ego, your greed, your attitude that ignores other person, or the desire to use other person for your own gain. These are the evil. Once you have that idea and attitude that you are evil, you don't necessarily need to commit any actions or say any words, but technically you are evil once you have that thought and the desire begin to develop inside you. A very moment that begins to happen that you are sinning in biblical terms. You're evil. So once you begin to disregard other human being, whether it's your friend, whether it's your parents, or whether it's your spouse, whether it's your brother and sisters, or your neighbors, and then yourself. Sometimes you begin to disregard yourself, the good self, and try to win over that good self, and your evil self dominates you, and when that happens, you are evil. So as a very thought, and desire and the thinking, the motive, if it occurs in you, you are good to the sentence of death. You say, oh, it's not only a thought, but God is, the Bible says, God is looking at your heart rather than your actions, because action can be deceiving. But you cannot deceive God. Once there is that heart, the idea, and your evil. Self-centered ego. Yeah, that goes with the ego. And then the differences, that's another element that kind of triggers conflicts and contradiction. When a human being, a person, faces something that is different than yours, or than you, or what you know, or what you experience, that difference you can take that as, as a very beautiful nature of diversity. That's the one way to receive and perceive it, and that's a biblical way. But most people, when they see something that is strange, unlikely, or what you dislike, or you're not comfortable with, then the automatic response from the inside is to judge it, and to devalue it, and to ignore it, and even to try to kill it, or make it disappear. So the way we respond to the differences, whether it's the physical, whether it's the culture, whether it's the society, whether it's the personality, whether it's the gender or race or age, whatever, it may trigger, and then it brings conflict and contradiction. Doesn't go together. Even if it may not conflict, contradiction is another thing that brings the danger of discrimination and then desire to kill. That's what happened with the Cain and Abel. The very story, the incident, the character Cain had this self-centered ego plus not being able to accept differences. They had a different vocation, and then different work, business, and then the question is he better because of his work? The answer is no, that's not it. It's your heart toward God. But he kind of mistakenly or intentionally ignored the truth. Selfishness, I already talked about it. Insufficient resources, desire to destroy. For some reason, somehow, no one taught Adam and Eve. They did not teach him to have that desire and means to destroy his own brother. No one taught him that evil desire is inside, just as much as that evil desire was in Eve, the wife of Adam, who had the desire for touching and eating of the fruit. It's not the action itself. It's included the acts of disobedience, but it's not premature disobedience that matters. that what matters more than disobedience is distrust or doubt. Doubting God or distrusting God. That is a desire to destroy their relationship or the trust or the interpersonal connection. So there is that desire to destroy and overturn what is given, what has been there, the order and the system, and what is given. We do have that desire to destroy, to revolt. So all that desire to do away with others who do not agree with you or listen to you, that will cause that conflict. And it's called evil. And as we study the biblical characters, even the so-called good ones, we do find these hidden desires and hidden selfishness, self-centeredness, and ego in them. Now, because of the nature of reality is paradoxical and is conflicting, it's full of dilemmas. Because of that, we need to make decisions according to whatever the blank. You cannot make your existence without making these choices and decisions. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Usually people make that evaluation of decisions by looking at the result. The Bible doesn't do that. God doesn't do that. The result is a secondary. Sometimes it's irrelevant. Doesn't really matter. What matter is, why do you make a certain decisions, and then what was the process reaching that result? That's how we view the Bible, how we read the Bible. As we read the characters, we don't see how successful and how high Daniel went. Did he raise his steps, the ladders up the top, or Joseph being the second most powerful man in the whole great land of Egypt? Those things are just the description. It doesn't. God does not give any merit to him being the prime minister. Either case, whether it's Daniel or Joseph, both are diasporas living in another country than where they were born and lived. That doesn't matter how successful these diaspora were. That's not the case in the Bible. The Bible is focusing on why Joseph made the decision to avoid the temptation from his master's wife, because he feared God. He did not fear the death or the penalty from the consequences, but the reason was he feared God. See, that's how Bible depicts and picture a character, and the lesson and the message is, you should fear God, His presence, whatever the situation is, whatever the moral issue might be, whatever the choices that you are to make. Make that those choices and decisions in fear of God. That's the message that we find from the study of the character of Joseph. People make choices and decisions according to the what he favors and what their preferences are, lifestyle is like, or according to priorities. But behind these are the beloved. Beloved is not only the most important, but it is most intense element in making a decision. Even your priority and favor or preferences, favoritism, are under the umbrella of beloved. Your beloved does decide your favorite food or preference of dress code. Because you believe that you want to look better to someone else's eyes, that will be the reason that you're making and buying certain dress, certain brand, a certain color and the style. So it has to do with your beloved. And when you read a character, you have to ask it 2 or 3 times of why and why and why. You continue to ask why until you reach the innermost beloved, the reason that character makes a certain decision. So sometimes the Bible does give you a very clear and solid reason for the character making a certain decision and choices. For example, Iscariot Judas, who sold Jesus. And it is clear that he thought Jesus as a political figure, the king, the political king, to be who will take over the land of Israel and then just drive out Romans. And everything is motivated by that ideal, the ideology. So Judah had his own ideology over the teaching of Jesus. Jesus, time and time, tells, my kingdom is not like on earth. My kingdom is from above and of above. He kept saying that. And so Judas didn't listen to it because he believed. He strongly believed. And he made a decision to sell Jesus eventually when he was disappointed. And why not as well? Just get money and get rich using this opportunity. So it becomes an opportunity for him rather than seeing Jesus as the Messiah from God, who is trying to bring a much better and bigger kingdom than this earthly one. So that would be how you evaluate these decisions and choices that characters make. Royalty. Once When someone makes a decision and choices, it shows what his or her royalty is. Whether it's a person, whether it's money, whether it's something else, the idea. Sometimes you can be loyal to an idea, ideology. So, royalty, what he or she worships. Inclination. Inclination is not as strong as royalty is, but you are inclined between the two. You sway from A to B a little bit, but that little bit can influence that decision. Usually the inclination can be momentary than long duration. But when you're making this pretty small judgment, a lot of times it's more of an inclination, the momentary kind of inclination than long thought ism. And sometimes you find these in the biblical characters, what their inclination was at the time of that decision. For example, Peter. Peter was asked the 3 times on that night when Jesus was captured and he was tried at the Caiaphas court, one of the high priest. He was brought on the very night, the Thursday night, and then he was asked. He was being interrogated by these so-called religious leaders at the time, and then a little bit away from that scene was Peter. He was actually the only one who came to see Jesus, the nearest. And then the people there asked, "Aren't you a disciple that Jesus was being tried here?" He said no. Second time, same question, he said no. And third time, when he was asked, he kind of got angry. And what are you talking about? I don't know that the guy from Nazareth. That's how he made the 3 different decisions to deny Jesus. It wasn't very momentary, even though his royalty was on Jesus. At that very moment, in that situation, in that particular reality, he made a decision to deny. Why? Because he was inclined to save his own life. He feared that he might get caught with Jesus being one of his followers and being tried and punished with Jesus. So these are kind of things that you're looking for when you're studying a character. The motive and intention. So inclination does reflect what his motive was when Peter made that 3 different denials. Then later on, Jesus asks him, after the resurrection, as they were sitting, having a roasted fish. Fish barbecue, right? And then Jesus asked him, "Do you love me, Peter?" And eventually, yes, "Do you love me more than all this?" 3 times Jesus asked, and he wasn't able to give an answer, real answer to that question. And eventually he says, "Lord, why do you ask this? You know my heart, the intention there. He's confusing, he's troubled, and he's being real to himself, being honest. He knows that his heart sways in between still. Even after Jesus was resurrected, he's still a human being, a simple man, unlimited. So, as you read that story in John, I believe it's John 20 or 21, you read the heart, the motive of Peter at that time, a particular time. And you try to identify yourself with Peter. What would I have done if I was Peter? What would my answer be when Jesus asks me 3 times, do you love me? Do you agapao me? And then phileo. It's different wordings. So that's how we do a character study. To look into the very motivation, the hidden, innermost motivation. When you're able to see that and be able to read that and identify that, then you are doing a good character study. Attitude. When you look at a person, it doesn't have to be a Bible character. Any people you know, or sometimes you don't know. People have attitude. It's noticeable and readable and visible through their gesture, facial expression, and then wording, and the tone, and then accents even. So there are many elements that kind of shows attitude. Attitude for a person, as much as it is key to the understanding and identifying a character, as much as the motive is, attitude is another key factor in determining and identifying and categorizing a character in the Bible, or in any stories, or in any reality that we have today. So it is important, and it's very valuable to know one's attitude and the motive. Because the motive and the attitude usually are connected. There are some attitudes that you can hide and act. So you got to know whether this person is acting or real. Most people in our cultures, in Asian cultures, we are taught to act as if, even though your inside does not say that. You don't have to you are discouraged to be a true self, and then respond and show in the way that the culture and then the theology, the ideology demands you to act. So we are accustomed to acting out so people do not feel uncomfortable with us or with me. So that's why it is sometimes difficult for us to tell what true attitude is of this person. And it's less likely in Western culture. They are not taught to hide their emotion or to act out so that they can please others. Anyway, so attitude is one of the hidden elements. Even though it may seem visible, usually it's not the case. Okay. Now let's take a short break and I'll come back. Okay, we are back. Let's continue the second part of week number 7 on August 15th. And going back to the topic of attitude. This attitude not only is projected to people, attitude we also have toward object. So you are trying to look at these both how he or she has an attitude toward, what kind of attitude toward the person or the situation or the reality or context or the religion, the idea, whatever. So this attitude is not only for the person, or it is for other things as well. It is either you have a good attitude toward or you're against something or someone. So either positive or negative. Either aggressive or favorable. Same thing. Sometimes you show very aggressive attitude. Sometimes it's kind or unkind attitude. That's sometimes impersonal or personal, interpersonal. So when you see a person, you know if this person is being more like impersonal, it's just a business. Or just see you as someone like a customer, not a person. But that happens in our real life as well. But the same thing happened in the biblical times. And you read these characters who are being impersonal. Motive. For me, as a pastor, as a believer, as the one who make those decisions to disciple a person in Christ, that's my job, that's my profession, that's what I do best, to help someone to mature and grow as a believer. And when I do that, the one thing, or the thing, what I'm trying to determine and decide and then to read is this, the motive. Not just a motive, but the motive. People, when you talk to them and to interact with a person for just a given amount of time. It doesn't take that long for me now. You can tell. You make that clear judgment whether this person, what his or her true, real, hidden motive is. He or she doesn't need to tell me. Usually they don't tell. They don't even know. You don't even know what your real motives are. But I can, with a trained, experienced eyes, you can see and read and determine and even go back and tell why this person, he or she, is having this kind of motive. Because you need to, clinically deal with these spiritual issues. And most of spiritual issues, so-called spiritual issues, it's not about the prayer or, about the worship, and it's not that. It's just a practical, everyday routine doing the daily existence. That's where the spiritual marriage and issues are. That's how, by dealing with those everyday matters, that you deal with his or her spiritual issues. So for me, try to read his or her heart. Whether it is centered around and focused on God and God only, or God and something else, or not God but something else. Usually that something else is he or she, being another word called self. Many times, most of the times, they try to disguise himself or herself. Usually it's unintentional, unconsciously. They don't know, they don't even know they are trying to hide it. But unintentionally, usually, and sometimes intentionally, they try to hide it. They are accustomed to hiding. But those who are trying to hide it intentionally, then I have a big red light, blinking. So that's where I need to be more careful. But usually they don't know what their hidden heart is. My role as a pastor is help them to be able to see and judge their own heart and motive by himself or herself as they begin the process of evaluation. I do not give away that judgment myself. Once they find it on their own, then I can help them to identify or put into word or put into the biblical perspective. But I never try to, force or tell them directly what your motives are. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. When he or she is not ready, even if I tell and give in very specific details, cannot accept it. It's a long time process, but at the beginning, very beginning, as early as possible, we should, I do try to read this heart, the motive, the reason, and cause. And we do the same thing in the Bible. The skills and the gift, the technique, or the perspective that I gain is real in-person experience, and more than that, by studying the characters in the Bible. Because the characters in the Bible are real. The Bible does not hide the motive and the reason and true cause for someone doing certain decision or action. Then we have inner thoughts. Inner thoughts are it's not the motive, but it has to do with the motive. Inner thoughts it has very wide spectrum. until you make a final decision. Because with the same motive, you can have different thoughts, different reflections on that motive. So as you have conversation, you're able to read the thoughts of this person. Sometimes it's organized and orderly. Many times it is not. They just put out whatever that there is, and it's rather random. And your job as a pastor is to be able to, reorganize it, and then ask that very question: why does person have this in the thoughts? Sometimes hidden, sometimes visible, sometimes organized, sometimes unorganized. But you're asking question why. And then once you have the answer to that question, then you are able to deal with his or her problems, the issues, the motive. Without that, actually you're not going to be successful as a pastor or even teacher. Interpersonal trait and spectrum. There's it. Let's say there's a person A and person B. Interpersonal is this: back and forth, a person to person, stimuli and response, response and stimuli, and goes on. Interperson that's a person A. You're just one person, but there are two selves. It depends on. Usually, when in a cartoon, there's is how they picture person who is evil and who is good. And it's too simple. It's more complex than this. But there's this interpersonal dynamic goes on and on as long as you live. That's a part of your paradoxical existence. Because these two, good and evil, and some other categories, doesn't exist together in one person, which is, theoretically speaking, it's not possible, but it does, in reality, it does happen. See, these are some of the categories that you may apply or use in understanding of biblical character or the characters, the person that you meet with in real life. Reasoning and feeling. This is like a thinking and feeling in MBTI. Thinking person or reasoning person is a left brain. More rational, has to be logical. It has to make a sense in terms of science. But feeling person is more emotional. It doesn't have to be that logical, rational. they sometimes don't like being logical and rational. Usually, used to say, men are more thinking, women are more feeling. Would it be the case in the like a 20th century context? But in 21st century context, I'm not sure if that's always true. I mean, it's not even usually true. But not so much of a gender, but either you're a man or a woman, there's still those who are rather thinking or reasoning, rational, logical person, than feeling, emotional kind of person. So that's like a personality spectrum. When you see the Peter, I keep giving you the example of Peter, the disciple, or the Apostle Peter, compared to Apostle Paul. Paul is more of a thinking person, while the Peter is more feeling person. He's very outgoing, while I think Paul was more of introvert than extrovert. Paul is more rational, while Peter is more irrational. Has more emotion. Then it's not judging and thinking. Interpersonal. One is meek and soft or kind, while there are some people who are coarser, rude and rough. Rude is not neutral, rough, tough, tough and meek. Coarse is not neutral. They're fast and slow. Neither is good or bad, meek or tough. You change, instead of coercive, use tough. Tough is good, meek is good, as good as tough. So neither is good or bad. It's just trait spectrum. As much as introvert and extrovert, you cannot tell which is better or good. Same thing. Some are like fast acting, some wants to be slow, everything slow. So slow is not bad. It is bad in Korea. You want everything to be fast and hurry and ready. That's modern Korean culture. It wasn't like that in the past. It was pretty slow. And slow was good in the Joseon dynasty, but after going through this Japanese occupation, and then another 3 years of Korean War, and after that post-war, industrialization and so on, became very fast. Everyone wants it fast. And in the Bible, you find someone who is like a Peter, who is very wants everything fast, fast emotion, fast action, not thinking twice. Pessimistic and optimistic. This is how people can perceive the reality. Some people say pessimistic is bad, while optimistic is good. And there are some Christian leaders who are promoting so-called positive thinking or positive attitude, well, does the Bible says teach that? No, I don't think so. The Bible teaches both. You can be pessimistic and optimistic. The Bible actually teaches you a paradox of optimistic pessimism or pessimistic optimism. And that's how the Bible sees the reality. But the future, if you're talking about the eternal future, it is the same thing. You can be optimistic if you're a believer, and you are to be pessimistic. Your end is pessimistic because you are not a believer. So even at the end of the history, there are both of them. A person can be exclusive, a person can be inclusive toward other people, or actually to himself. Because your nature and the trait and your persona is, if it's inclusive, you want to include everyone. You want to be friends with everyone. If your inner person is exclusive, you are very choosy about making friends or who you are relating with. So these are some of the interpersonal trait spectrum that you're looking for and as you study these biblical characters. And that gives you a very clear and balanced picture of a character, or full-blown understanding of a character. That's what we are looking for, what we are aiming, because we are doing a study of a character, or a character study. When you say study, again, it is research, not just a jumping board kind of, springboard kind of response, instant response. No, we don't want to do that. We want to do in-depth, educated, scientific study of a character. Other indicators. These are very common indicators that you can write out as you just read the story. It doesn't take very long. It's fact. It's factual. You can find out at the first level reading. But we do three level readings: first, second, and third. It's like an in-depth reading kind of technique. But at the first level reading, you just try to identify the name of the character, his or her gender, whether female or male, then the age at the given time of the story, then ethnicity, tribal, which tribal this of 12 this person belonged to in the Old Testament, if it's a Jew. Then financial, whether this person is rich or not. Sometimes it's given, sometimes it's not. And the position, and social-cultural. And so social position and the social-cultural status. Vocational, what his or her job is. The education. For example, Moses had the best education at the time that is given in the kingdom of Egypt, in the palace, as a prince. He had the best education. Language, the astrology, at the time that was a big thing, and the agriculture, and then the magic, like reading palms and these things. That was popular at the time of Moses, and religious. He even though he did not really accept their belief, but he was educated. So as you try to understand Moses, he's just not a guy. He's not a guy that doing the shepherd work in the wilderness. It mentioned that because a movie, if you had seen some movies of Moses, it kind of pictures the later life of Moses. So you kind of forget he was the king. But in Disney version of the Moses, the prince of was that prince of Egypt? And in that version, you have a little better idea him as a prince of Egypt. So these elements helps you to understand the character better, and it identifies that character. And the family dynamics. To if you're trying to understand the story of Esau and what was his name? The brother of Esau. They were twins, but not identical twins. They were two separate twins. And then they look different, they think different, their hobby and the favorite activities are different, and there's that brotherly rivalry, which was encouraged to some degree by their parents. So, and the parents in the Bible, they are real. It's not mystified. So you see all these family dynamics going on in this Old Testament families, so-called patriarchs. Patriarchs are the early fathers. So this generation of patriarchs, they had their own share of family dynamics. Yeah, Jacob and Esau. So then it goes to the Jacob's line. He was very cunning and kind of tricky kind of guy, and that runs to even to his children. And he had several wives, and then children from each different wives. And then the youngest one was Joseph, whom he had favored. Meaning, he didn't like, he liked his children, but he kind of showed favoritism to the youngest one, which caused him to be isolated by other brothers, older brothers, and eventually making him to end up being sold to Egyptians eventually. Because Jacob took that favoritism to his youngest son, giving him a very expensive special dress and so on, that kind of failed him. So there are these family dynamics that you need to understand in the character. And you see this Joseph being very naive, telling the dream and making kind of self-interpretation of that dream as he present and shared his dream to his brothers that him being in the future, being the first or ruler over the older brothers, who was gonna like that idea? So that kind of caused him to have that trouble. So we need these realistic interpretation of the situation according to the given text. And you can imagine many educated guess, correct, rational guess from the story itself to understand and to help to understand the character in its reality. So that's that for the lesson 3. Let's go to lesson 4 to continue our discussion. Hold on a second. Okay, here we go. Lesson 4. Holistic perception of a person. Now we continue on this how to categorize, understand, analyze, and identify a character or characters. And this is one of the approach that I strongly recommend. You can see a person psychologically or socially and so on. That helps. But at the end, we want to be able to see that person, the character, with a holistic perspective. Holistic perspective. So here we go, lesson 4. Beginning. What is a holistic understanding, which I recommend strongly? It is the belief or an idea that the part of something or someone are interconnected and should be understood only by reference to the whole. Reference to the whole. If we are studying his character, this character, and he did certain things, you don't just look at that thing, but you go the background, his or her early childhood, and then the given reality. It should include reality, why he or she has to do certain things. There is obvious. There is sometimes you don't have any other choices. These elements are part of the whole. You try to see as much as you can to understand certain actions, certain words, certain decision, and so on. So that's being holistic. You don't just look at the physical, but you try to see his psychology and spirituality as well. Not only you look at this particular person, but you want to read about his parents, father and mother, and then brothers, and then friends and neighbors, who influence or being influenced by this particular character. So you want to read the whole picture, whole person, whole story. That's just the power. Sometimes when a pastor or teacher read and teach these Bible stories or about Bible characters, they only focus so-called the spiritual, how he or she worship God, how he or she obey God. Well, that is important. That is important. But how he or she interacted with other people, or to another person inside him or her. That is also very important, as much as important than the religious aspect of that person. So we are looking at the whole person, his health, his wealth, his social status, social interactions, his job, work, how he worked, how much he worked, and so on. See, those are very key and important factors in understanding not only the character, not only the story, not only the message, and also it is important for us to be able to apply what you read and see in true and real actual life of a believer to your own context and own reality. That's how it should be. Wholeness of a person. These are the spectrums of wholeness. To be inclusive, to be more of a bigger picture, is the human being, any human being, do or does have these three dimensions. Physical, we have body. The mental, we have thoughts and mind. Psychology. And then spiritual. Spiritual is not here, it's from here to outside. That's how I think I can describe. That's the only way probably I can describe. It comes from the inner heart, the true person, and it rules over, it dominates who you are. That's spiritual for me. It's not like a supernatural or mystical or unseen. Of course it's unseen, but it doesn't mean that it's not visible. It is detectable, it's visible. You can make a judgment, and that's spiritual. It's who you are and why you are and what you are. See, the way that I say it, how you are, what you are, and who you are. How you are. I mean, these questions, why, what, who, how, to describe who, you need to ask what you are, why you are, and how you are. And these things, they answer. It's not separate, it's interconnected, integrated, and that tells exactly about your spirituality. And that's how I determine a person, how I perceive a person, and that's a pastor. I mean, because I'm a pastor, I'm trying to do that, and that's holistic. Usually, people just see today, and then 21st century modern ways, we are very trained or used to the looking at a person in its outward appearance, the physical appearance. That's what the media is promoting, but you have to be able to understand and see it and communicate his or her mental and then spiritual. This happens when you're examining and studying the biblical character in depth. Now, with the same line as the spirit, soul, and body, the same thing. Then cognitive, affirmative, and affective. That's the more specific of the soul. Even though these elements are related to your physical to some degree, but it's mainly about your soul. Cognitive is your intellectual, the learning and knowledge part, how your brain works, the rational, being rational and logical, and all these things. So some are more cognitive than affective. Affective is where your heart, where your emotion is, what your feeling is. So what you know and what you feel is two different domains. They interact, of course. Your feeling may impact the knowledge, or your knowledge or your rationality may impact your emotion. You have these two dimensions. And depending on who you are, one is dominating the other. You cannot have full balance. I rarely see anyone who is truly balanced, cognitive and affective, emotion and intellect. These are, it goes together, but one does dominate the other. Same thing in the biblical characters. Affirmative. It's more like an arrow. Your cognitive may dominate or affective may dominate, whichever the balance is. So in reality, it could be either cognitive driven or affective driven. But the affirmative is the desire and willingness, willpower. Some think and think, but don't make that decision, or don't make that decision into action. Some may feel and feel and feel, but doesn't come up with appropriate or consequent actions. Affirmative is that inner strength, being able to make that decision, and after the decision, carry that out into time and space and play and the actual reality. So those who have a weak affirmative, he or she is not able to actually continue to bring out the action. So that's how we can make that analysis of a person. That's very helpful, this triangular domain or dimension of a person by applying that, you can understand yourself first. That's very key. You have to be able to identify who you are. What is your spirituality? What is your mentality? What is your physicality? Physicality, whether tall, big, small, it doesn't affect your existence, but not as much as your mentality or spirituality. That's the key that affecting your existence the most is, of course, the spirituality. Then from the cognitive, affective, and affirmative, you compare cognitive versus affective. Which is your driving force? Which is stronger? Which is dominant? It doesn't change from situation to situation. Usually it doesn't. It doesn't do that. Either you're constantly cognitive driven or affective driven. Either one of them. Then you either have a very strong, solid affirmative in yourself, or you do not. Weaker. So once those who have weak affirmative in the self, usually they fall into temptation easily. And then they are the ones usually labeled as lazy. And they are not likely to succeed in this society. But that doesn't mean that he or she is a failure. It's just weak and affirmative. It doesn't have a strong will. That's it. Now, the next paragraph. Category. Wholeness. Dimension. Being and doing and becoming. Sometimes that formula is this might be a good formula to use that 3 different domains. Being, that's who you are. Doing, that's what you do, your action, your word. And then the result, becoming, or growing, or maturing, or developing, improving. Sometimes it could be negative. Declining, decreasing, failing, falling, can be another negative becoming. So becoming can be positive, it can be negative. But we want to, as a believer, we want to have becoming more like Christ Jesus every day. That's what we want. Your being is inside. By affirmative side or making decisions and carrying it out, then that's the doing. Doing is word and action usually. And doing is expressed in the form of either work or relationships. Okay, I want you to remember that. Doing in working and doing in relationship. Relationship with the other people is called relationship. Relationship with the reality other than human being, that's called work. So your work is to interact with your surroundings that's other than human, other person. So whether it's a material, whether it's a time, space, and the energy, and the weather, all these things are elements of reality that demands your work. And the person relating to person is going to be your personal relationship. And that's a part of becoming. So becoming is with the people and with the given creation or the physical world that we live in. So that's how we picture a person, and that applies exactly to the understanding of biblical characters. Okay. Well, time's up for today, week number 7. And thank you for listening and coming. And I'll see you guys next week. And until then, keep yourself thinking about the person and character. Okay?